Hi everyone and welcome to my new YouTube channel, and I've created this one because this is going to be filled with all of the Fightin Writin stuff that I want to create. A lot of it will be build videos like this one to begin with, because I'm working on a whole new project for Fightin Writin, which I'll explain in a minute. But other stuff that I do, kind of narrative read-throughs and kind of instructional videos for Fightin Writin, all of that kind of stuff will go here. A lot of it's going to be separate to my other stuff. Even though I run Fightin Writin as kind of an author-led workshop within schools, it is slightly different to the other author stuff I do. It's different to kind of my book promo videos and all of that kind of stuff, poetry readings. So I wanted something that was different, that was more build, terrain, paint, you know, that kind of action focus. So that's what this is all about. And now seemed like a really good time to start that, because I'm starting a new project within Fightin Writin, and it's going to be slightly different to, at the minute, Fightin Writin, for those who haven't experienced it, is a workshop that I run in schools where I take in a load of battle boards, a load of miniatures, and the children fight 3-on-3 skirmish battles. And we use that as a structure for narrative writing, for looking at action and the structure of story, the structure of events, and how we can write really good narratives. And they work really well. They're really popular in schools. The children absolutely love them. I've had really positive feedback from teachers, so I'm really happy with those. But at the minute, the boards that I'm using are disparate. They're all separate. There's kind of like a futuristic science fiction, toxic waste canal, I suppose is the best way to describe it. There's a big arena, like ancient Roman arena, and there are a load of boards that are just plain, and we throw down a load of scattered terrain. And it's really interesting because some children really prefer those, where they can move the terrain around and they can control that part of the battle as well for their writing. Other children just love the big kind of impact boards where they get there and there's a big arena on it and they can go in and fight. So having a mix of both is really useful. But what I want is something that I can also take in that is going to be much more narrative driven. So it's already got a big narrative behind it. And so what I'm going to create over the next few months, probably 6 months to 9 months, is a big set of 6 boards that work together as kind of a cohesive set of boards that I can take in, and I can either run them as one big board with small groups of pupils. We can do some really good focused writing on that, kind of telling a much larger story, or they can break off into 6 individual boards and be used with, you know, whole classes. So at the minute, like I say, the skirmish battles are 3-on-3, so 6 boards will mean that I'll be able to work with 36 children, which is great. That's kind of bigger than most average class sizes. And then with the boards that I've already got, that kind of doubles up to 72. At the minute I don't have enough miniatures for that, but that's the long-term plan, is to have more and more boards that I can take in and work with bigger groups. So that kind of dictates how these boards need to work. When I'm designing them, and actually the sketching out on the boards, which you'll see in a minute, I did on camera, but a lot of the stuff that I recorded to begin with, I realised I was recording on an old memory card, which was very slow, and it just kept dropping out and stopping halfway through recording everything, so there was nothing usable really from that. So I've kind of got some photographs that I took of the initial pen layout. And what I've tried to achieve with that is, it has to work as a big 2x3 board, and each board is 50 centimetres squared, for the simple fact that they fit nicely on a primary school table. Primary school tables are about 55 centimetres wide, so I can put a 50 centimetre board on there and the children can all reach it and they can play, and it doesn't fall off the end of the table. So each board is 50 by 50 centimetres, which is about 20 inch by 20 inch for those of you thinking in imperial. So together that will give me a board that's 40 inch by 60 inch. If I put them all together, which is really good size, kind of, it's almost, you know, Warhammer 40k kind of size, if you're, you know, if you're the kind of thing of those kind of games, and working together, that can be a really big narrative. If I have a group of, say, 10 children doing some intervention work, then that will work really well for those. So it's got to be playable across that big board. But it's also got to be playable. If I take each board off separately and give them to a group of children, they've got to be able to play a good skirmish battle on that 20 inch by 20 inch, 50 centimetre by 50 centimetre board, as though that was their entire battlefield. So I can't have any dead zones almost where it'd be like, oh yeah, this is a bit of open space that you can kind of run across within a big battle board. We can't have any of that. Each board on its own has got to stand up to being played on. I did consider having it so that you could put the 6 boards back together in a kind of in a more modular way, but that was just impossible to try and figure out a way that would work and interlock, because I want a canal system in there, kind of. I'm thinking very Mordheim with its style, this kind of old Tudory rundown kind of thing. The story behind this city is that it was ran by a mayor who it was a prosperous trade town. The mayor grew incredibly greedy and started to just run it into the ground. People fled, people left, and then it was cursed by a kind of sorcerer, a magician, so that the people who had remained would never die. So this city now is just filled with these kind of never dead people, as I've called them at the minute, ruled over by this hideous mayor with his cult following. And the children will take on the role of adventurers, again a bit like Mordheim. They'll take on this role of adventurers heading into the city to try and defeat the never dead or the cult leaders, because that gives it quite a nice backstory. Some of the children will control the never dead, some of the children will control the adventurers, and that will also work well with the clans that I've got from the existing Fightin Writin boards. So it's a bit more efficient. I don't have to create a whole new cast of characters and clans, I can just add some to it. And so within the boards, that kind of thematic narrative needs to come across as well. That is this town that's not necessarily been, destroyed by attacking invaders, but has just more been left to rack and ruin. So buildings are starting to fall down, but there might be signs of repair on them. Some of the cultists that are still there, some of the never dead might have tried to repair them in the first instance. So that kind of aesthetic. And I haven't decided yet whether I want it to be kind of full-on winter with loads of snow and frost and things like that. That will come as I start to build the buildings. But this video really is just about planning out the boards. So with everything that I'm building with this, it has to be playable, but it also has to be tough. Okay, one thing I've learned from running these workshops with children is that as much as they try their hardest, they can be quite clumsy. And things break really easily. Figures break easily, kind of anything dangling off the edge of buildings is likely to get snapped off, things get knocked, things get dropped and bumped. It's all accidental, but everything I'm designing for this is going to have to be extra durable. And you'll see kind of the ways in which I do that throughout this build. So I'm going to have a go at looking at kind of quickly mocking up and designing all 6 boards to a degree that I can then take each board at a time for the next few videos and start to finish them off and add buildings to them and things like that. So hopefully it kind of all becomes clear in the video. I just wanted to explain why this was a new channel, what I'm hoping for with the project, and I'll see you on the other side. Here we go. So this is where I lost a lot of the footage at the beginning, and you can see the boards. I've sketched them all out, laid them out where I want each individual board to be. That'll start to come in more, like I say, as I go through each board. But the first job really was to pad it all out with polystyrene. Now XPS polystyrene is almost impossible to get hold of in the UK in any kind of thickness, so I started by just using normal expanded polystyrene because this can kind of bulk out everything that I need to do. And I will use the thinner XPS I can get hold of, which is like the 6 or the 10mm XPS, to kind of cover everything in later. So, and just, getting used to my new foam cutting tool as well, which was one of the best things I've ever bought. Made this so much easier. And at this point, I'm trying to figure out how wide I want the canal to be. And I've not quite made it wide enough, so I make it a little bit wider before I stick it down onto the board. It just makes it bit of a better gameplay because I want to have like a wooden towpath along the side of it. I'm using a miniature just to help kind of get scale. For this board, I use the Gorilla Glue adhesive to try and stick it down. It works well, but in the end I just end up using kind of Wilkinson's own brand contact adhesive, kind of no nails equivalent. But this stuff really needs weighing down and it takes a long time to dry, so that's why I moved on to the contact adhesive in the end. This was with the XPS I've got, and I wanted to test out some of my texture roll to see which ones worked, which ones looked well, but also I wanted to see how the colours came out when I painted them. So I gave them a coat of Mod Podge and grey paint just to seal the XPS, because I don't want to spray paint it later on and have it kind of dissolve, which is what polystyrene does. So I just wanted to paint it all up and see what happens. And then I'll go over it with the airbrush. I'll give it some dry brushing just to kind of see the different colours that come out with it once it's dry. This was just a sample. This was just to give me an idea of the different texture rollers I kind of 3D printed and whether they worked well enough on the XPS. The other thing that I might try and do when I come to coat the boards later on is use either the Geek Gaming Scenics modelling compound or Sculptor mould, because that takes the texture rollers really, really well. I needed to trim off some polystyrene from the edge, but what I actually end up doing in a bit is using a saw to cut off 10mm around the edge of the board. And the reason I do that is because, again, white expanded polystyrene is pretty soft, and these are going to get knocked about. They're going to get children bumping into the sides of them. They're going to get dented and deformed, whereas the XPS is a lot tougher, especially when it's coated with Mod Podge and when it's coated with the kind of the sealant and the varnish. So what I end up doing is bordering each of the boards with 10mm XPS, this grey or black XPS foam, and I texture that up with the texture rollers as well. But what that does is gives the edging of the board much more protection. So hopefully they'll be more durable, hopefully they will last a lot longer. With one of my other boards I made the mistake of using cork and filler around the edges, and it just doesn't hold up very well to the kind of knocks that it gets. So I texture these strips using one of the brick texture rollers. Again, this doesn't need to be the most detailed because this is going to be on the outside of the board. When they're all together you will only see a few of these anyway because they'll all join up, and when they're separate it's really not what we're going to be focusing on. But I wanted to give it something, so it had some sort of texture around the edge. It wasn't just flat and boring. So here you can see that I've used a saw off camera to cut off the edge, so just trimming it off with my knife. And so what I did with all of the pieces of white polystyrene going forward after this board was just cut it straight down to 480mm instead of 500mm, so I didn't have to do this every time. And then I could just stick them in the middle and I would have that 10mm border around each side to use the XPS on. So here just measuring how I needed to do them. I didn't bother getting polystyrene cutter out for this, I just went with a sharp blade. It's much easier, much quicker, I can trim it down, keep it square. And again, to stick these onto the board, I considered using the Gorilla Glue, but I'd got the Wilkinson's own glue and it was fine. It holds it on, and it also acts a little bit like a filler. So the gaps in between the joins, where these on the corners now are brilliantly, I've done this off camera, but the gaps between the XPS are filled by the glue, and it acts like a solid filler once it's set, so I can then carve into it if I need to, just to kind of carry on the brick texture. Now I didn't use this 10mm stuff on the inside of the canal walls. I'm going to do that when I approach each individual board, and I'm going to use the 6mm, but I'm going to cut it in half, so it's going to be 3mm, because that doesn't need to be as tough or as durable, but I want to be able to texture it, and you can't obviously texture the expanded polystyrene. So I will texture a strip of it cut down to 3mm, and I will put that onto the canal walls. The other thing I need to kind of decide as I go through this is, am I going to do a resin pour for the canal, or am I just going to paint the wood and use something like the water texture, or again gloss Mod Podge, just to give the impression of waves and ripples. So this is all of the boards when I have polystyrened them all up. Some of them I haven't bordered yet, I haven't put the edging around, but you can see how they butt together nicely. When there's a top on them as well, when all the kind of roads and that are on there, it will be even nicer. So I wanted a ramp to get up to this, but I wanted different levels. So when they're together, I wanted different levels for them to play on, and when they're apart, I wanted different levels. So this is, I'm just sketching out where I think the path might go. I want a lot of houses. I want a lot of pathways and alleyways and things like that. So I'm trying to just sketch out where the houses might go. You can see I've got lots of sketching around. I've started to cut out bits of cardboard, which just gives me a better idea of the widths of the paths. And again, this will all change when I come to do it on each individual board. Here I want tunnels as well underneath some of the houses. So I've cut some of the polystyrene in half to give myself a thinner layer. And then I cut out where I want the tunnels to go. And then that means that I can then stick on top of that, when I come to it, the other piece of polystyrene, and it will just be a nice easy tunnel without having to try and gouge out polystyrene, which again, that will come in more. I'll show you that more when I actually get to those boards. Here, when the top bits have been placed on, you can kind of see what I mean by the tunnels have been cut out. These haven't been glued down at this point, and I will go through with some modelling compound and make them look more like caves in there, but again, that will all come later on. Hello again. So hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully you can see where I'm kind of coming from with the playability of each board, with how it kind of all ties together in that unified, cohesive whole board, but also breaks off into playable individual boards. More of that will become clear as I work my way through each board and kind of finalise where the buildings are going to go and where the paths are going to go and all of that kind of stuff. I think that will come out a lot more as I start to build them. As I'm recording these videos, I haven't finished the project. I know sometimes people have already finished the project and they just do these things. I'm going to be videoing this as we go along. So this isn't my full-time job, building these is not my full-time job, so don't expect a video a week. I'm hoping to maybe be able to do a video every 2 weeks, even if it's just kind of a building on each board, maybe a building each 2 weeks, because that will drive the project forward. That'll keep me going, it'll keep me kind of physically moving this project forward towards a completion. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you do, do the usual, like, subscribe, click that bell, get notifications when it comes out. Obviously this is a new channel with no followers as I'm uploading this video, so hopefully, that'll change soon and we'll kind of get a few more on board. If you do want to support what I'm doing, head to my website, buy my books. That's the best way. Buy my kind of game books, the Pick Your Path adventure game books, any of my children's books, Monster Academies or the Epic Fantasy Shadowland Chronicles. That's the best way at the minute to kind of support what I'm doing. Or if you do work in a school, get in touch and see if we can kind of run one of the existing Fightin Writin workshops while this is all being done. Thanks very much for watching and see you in the next one.